But what we have here is a clear indication from Dr. Heaps that he always wanted to testify. It was always his desire to testify.
A gynecologist who worked at UCLA for decades is sentenced to 11 years in prison for sexually abusing patients. Thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime. I'm Angenette Levy. Prosecutors in Los Angeles County, California, say Dr. James Heaps took advantage of his patients in the worst way imaginable by sexually abusing them for his own sexual gratification. Last October, a jury found Heaps guilty of 3 counts of sexual battery by fraud and 2 counts of sexual penetration of an unconscious person. Before he was sentenced, Heaps requested a new trial, claiming his testimony could have explained some of the claims made by prosecutors and the victims.
And one might suggest, well, it was a tactical decision, but not all tactical decisions are sound. And in this instance, without an indication that the medical records were coming in, I believe it was an unsound decision not to put the defendant on the stand.
But prosecutors argued that Heaps likely didn't take the stand because it would have hurt him more than it would have helped.
I will tell the court this, that I was hoping he would testify. Most prosecutors want the defendant on the stand. And in this particular case, Mr. Levy, he may not admit it, but he knows. He knows had Dr. Heaps taken the stand, he would have opened himself up to the 500 and some odd complaints in this case, meaning a civil action.
The New York Times reports that UCLA has paid out nearly $700 million to settle claims of sexual misconduct made by thousands of patients since the 1980s against Dr. Heaps. When arguing against the request for a new trial, the deputy district attorney outlined some of the claims made by the victims.
The defendant is not stupid. He is not going to put in the medical records, oh, and by the way, I decided to stick my finger up Jane T. or her and cop a seal. The medical records aren't going to say, oh, I squeezed Natalie B's breast. I did this and I did that.
Heaps's lawyer pointed out that he was not convicted of every charge he faced.
When you come back with not guilties, when you come back with hung counts, and you come back with only 5 convictions on a 21-count indictment, you have a jury that necessarily looked at all of the evidence in a very critical manner. And you can also tell by the great number of juror questions that were sent out during deliberation that this jury was very conscientious.
That request for a new trial was denied. Heaps will be back in court this month asking that he be granted bail while he appeals. As of right now, the prosecution has not said whether or not it intends to retry Heaps on the counts where the jury was hung. For Law and Crime, I'm Angenette Levy.